welcome to Divorce Talk, the voice of a CDFA. I'm your host, Carol Lee Roberts, the president of the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts, and invite you to join us each second Tuesday of the month for our podcast and information and insight from our CDFA professionals. Today, we're doing something slightly different. We're not interviewing a CDFA professional. Instead, we're interviewing Gordon Stein, and Gordon is a keynote speaker, blogger, an expert on financial literacy, an author, and has very recently done a webinar for our CDFA professionals. And after his webinar, I just found the information he shared with us so interesting, and a lot of the CDFAs who had listened to the webinar have already reached out to him for more information. So I thought it would be a great idea to bring this to a broader audience. At the beginning of the webinar, you stated some statistics that, quite honestly, I'm still bouncing around in my head. I think the one that stuck with me the most was most people retire with $10,000 in savings. But would you care to give us a bigger picture of what's going on in the US as far as saving for retirement, how people spend their money, just that type of information?
Yeah, it's really quite something. And I've always been struck with the state of financial wellness. And often when I'm speaking, I'll take a look at it in the way we experience our lives. So we start off, and often our first major purchase is a car. And when I graduated from college, it was a 36-month car loan or a 48-month car loan, Carol Lee, and we all knew that you want a 36-month loan because then you're going to pay less interest than the people who would get a 48-month loan. Well, now the average in the US actually and in Canada is the 72-month car loan. And the 84-month car loan is becoming increasingly popular. And not unusual, we see 96-month car loans. So we see this stretching out of credit. And of course, from a marketing perspective, you're going to sell more cars if you can offer a 96-month car loan and push people to buy, more than what they need. And then when you think about, car trade-ins, fully a third of them now are underwater. So you can picture our poor consumer getting pushed into a vehicle they can't afford. They're bringing back their old one too soon. It's underwater. That gets added onto the interest. And so people just get more and more stretched. So then, then they need their furniture and their things for their home and their clothing. And then we get to this point of 60% of Americans now living paycheck to paycheck. And there was an interesting piece that Motley Fool did on $250,000 income earners, and fully a third of them are living paycheck to paycheck. So imagine earning $250,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck, but that's what a third of them are doing.
Well, and I think that's so important because I think it's really easy for people who have chosen a career in financial advice to think that, I'm dealing with people that make a lot of money and I need to guide them along the path of their investments, but I really don't have to worry about budgeting. These people have got it, and they don't got it.
Well, the stats tell us they don't. It's really quite remarkable. If you think about 70% of millennials permanently carrying a credit card balance. So often when we're dealing with wealth advisors, to your point, they're focused on, they've got the right portfolio for them, they've got their investments in line, but they need help on savings. It's such an issue. And there is no single thing they can do that's going to improve their finances more than help people increase their savings rate. You add another $1,000 a month, that's going to more dramatically change their financial outcome than any tweaks they're going to do to their portfolio.
Let's talk about savings and some of the ideas you have and some of the areas you have your clients focus. But before we do that, I think it's important that the recipes that you give or the guidance you give is not the old, just cut out Starbucks and life will be fine. So can you talk a little bit about the areas you ask people to focus on?
Yeah, I think it's a great point you're making, Carol Lee, because I often think of it as a tug of war. Some people say, well, I want to live my life now. I'm not going to worry about my retirement. I want to focus on, fear of missing out. I want to enjoy myself now. The other half of the people say, no, you have to save diligently for retirement. Otherwise, you're going to end up with nothing. You're going to be a Walmart greeter. And I think the answer is no. I think you're going to have a great life now, and you're going to save to retirement. And so when I wrote Cash Flow Cookbook, I stumbled into this idea about getting free car washes legally. And I thought, well, gee, this is kind of neat. Save $25 a month, but who cares? But that got me started and I built a list. And then the list grew to $13,000 of monthly savings ideas. So this was really quite remarkable. And, as financial professionals, we all know you invest that money at, let's say, 7% over 10, 20, 30 years, the difference is massive. So that led to this whole host of ideas where you don't give up your Starbucks, you don't stop going out for dinner. You have a wonderful life, but you free up cash flow in all these kinds of hidden or stealthy areas. So that's the overall premise.
Well, and I think that this particular idea of you look at where you're spending your money and just start spending it more consciously, knowing what you're doing, look to see if there are savings that you can capitalize on, is, for lack of a better word, an easier sell to clients going through divorce than it is to clients who aren't, because the framework's already there. They're already looking at their finances. They're already imagining their new lives. Some of them are petrified imagining their new lives because, oh my God, we're 50 plus years old. Suddenly I'm going to have half the income, or as you explain, in most cases, less than half the income.
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to do this going forward? So why don't you talk a little bit about those areas that you encourage people to examine, and also the response you've gotten from the webinar we had so far? How many people have reached out to begin incorporating this?
Yeah, I mean, I stumbled into the idea for the book, back in 2017, and I've been speaking on the book nonstop. And the bulk of it's with wealth advisors and to their clients, most importantly, showing them how to free up cash flow really changes the relationship. So yeah, let's talk about a few of those areas. There's the obvious things, people have a story about how they've reshopped their car insurance and their home insurance, and that's a great place to start. But you can extend that. You can reshop all kinds of bills, your cell phone bill, cable TV, internet, the list goes on to every single monthly expenditure can be significantly reduced. So those are kind of obvious, a reshopping kind of a thing. But sometimes some of these ideas are a bit more inventive. And here's an interesting one. This is another one that I have done myself, and pretty much everything in the book I've lived. This one I stumbled into when my kids were younger, and we had two boys at the time, and they were about 2 and 4. And so we had a nanny because that was the most efficient way to, do our childcare, with my spouse and I both working. And so we were spending about $25,000 a year at the time for this nanny. And we were friends with the neighbors across the street, and they too had a nanny for their two boys about the same age. And they weren't happy with her, and they were going to actually terminate her employment. And then I got onto this idea, why don't we just share a nanny? So we gave our nanny a significant raise, and she now looked after the 4 boys. It was much easier, according to her, because the 4 boys would just play together. We alternated houses, but you think about each family saving $10,000 a year. And that's something you might not have thought of. It's the kind of thing you could just carry on with that childcare arrangement and miss out. Now, you add $10,000 a year in savings to just about anyone's budget, other than, beyond mass affluent. That's a material difference. So that's one of these class of interesting ones. The other one that I find fascinating is credit scores. And most of us know that if you improve your credit score, it can reduce loan cost, which it certainly can. But if you get on my FICO and play around with it a little bit, I found a 7-fold difference in car loan cost depending on your credit scores. And car insurance and home insurance can swing 30 to 50% if you improve that credit score. But the icing on the cake is that 80% of credit reports contain errors. So if you don't have a peek under the hood at your credit score and credit report, you could be missing out on significant money. This could be $1,000 a month. So when I wrote the book, I got into, housing, transportation, food, household, lifestyle, and financial. And it does a full sweep with 60 different financial recipes, things to check. And just like a recipe, tells you exactly how to change it. So the reason this works so well is you get your clients working on this book and they now are a partner with you in improving their financial wellness. They're going to work on these savings ideas. And as a financial advisor, as an example, you're going to work on getting the right portfolio and optimizing their returns. So that's where the response was overwhelming. I had 75 a few members reach out wanting my financial advisor playbook. How do I do this? Can we book some time together on the phone? So I've been busy nonstop since we last ran that.
Well, as I said, I found a lot of the information just absolutely fascinating. And, you gave a webinar to over 300 financial advisors who were saying, I didn't know that, or I haven't checked that.
Yeah.
And if you think about the fact that the financial professionals are going, oh, wow, how can we possibly be educating our clients when we haven't checked into these things? And I have, since your webinar, started looking at stuff where I'm spending my money, and I have found savings and found that, I'm paying for different streaming services that really have the exact same content and I don't need both, or I'm paying for unlimited data on a cell phone that doesn't have internet capabilities because it's for a grandchild. So it's simple to do. You just have to take the time to do it. And I think your book is just such a great, roadmap for how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's it exactly. And, sometimes I've talked to financial advisors and say, oh, no, we go through that with people. Well, you may be getting to some of the ideas, but why not get to all of the ideas? And the key thing, I think, is getting the client doing some work, exaggerating a little bit. Often when I look at these, annual planning meetings with the wealth advisor, the clients are kind of coming in saying, a friend of mine, his advisor got him 8.5% last year. What did you get me? Well, that's not a relationship. Let's change that relationship. Let's give the clients a copy of Cash Flow Cookbook, get them working on improving their savings rate, have them come back, give them a homework assignment. Let's meet again in 2 weeks. Tell me which of these ideas you're going to implement, how much total cash you can free up, and then let's redraw your wealth projection. Let's have you retire with 2.3 million instead of 1.4. Let's have you retire with 5.6 million instead of 4.2 by increasing that savings rate painlessly, minimal effort, minimal sacrifice. And it's powerful. It just makes a huge difference for people.
For those who have listened to this, one of the questions I almost always ask our advisors is, why did you decide to focus on clients going through divorce? And isn't it emotional and tumultuous? And, you don't focus on clients going through divorce. It's just a part of your practice. But you were just so generous in sharing your experience on divorce and the aftermath of divorce previously. I wonder if you'd share that with our audience again.
Oh, sure. And it was funny when we did the webinar, Carol Lee, because when I asked the question, how many of you have been divorced? And we had 300 people on, the chat was flying. Everybody saying, me, I'm in the club, So, yeah, I mean, I was really unhappy in my marriage. And I spent 2 years laboring over the decision because it's a tough one. And it came after 27 years of marriage. And as we all know, it isn't just the divorce, it's upheaval, it's selling houses, it's changing dynamics with children, it changes everything. And so I made the really difficult decision. And one of the therapists that I work with said, you do have a right to be happy. And I just hadn't thought of it in those terms. I thought, well, I'm married and I'll grit it out and I'm not happy. And I labored with it so long, and that little phrase stuck in my head. You do have a right to be happy. And I made the very difficult decision to get divorced and sell the family home and, lost the vacation property and all of this stuff. And really not, and I just resigned myself that I would be alone, but at least I would be true to myself. And, I've got my children and my work and that would be my life. And not long after, this difficult decision, I was actually in Windsor, Ontario, doing a TV spot for my book. And I booked all the travel for that. And not long after that, I was on Facebook Messenger. And up popped with a little green dot, meaning she was online, an old girlfriend from 35 years prior. And I thought, gee, that's crazy. And she lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And I sent her a Facebook Messenger and I said, look, this is crazy. I've not seen you in 35 years, but I'm going to be in Windsor doing this TV spot. You're in Cleveland, not too far apart. Could we grab a dinner? And she replied right away. And she said, this really is crazy. Let's do it. So those from Ohio, we met at Tony Paco's, which gets mentioned in MASH, where Klinger liked to get his hot dogs. So we met at Tony Paco's for dinner. And, she walked in and the whole thing started all over again, just as it did 35 years prior. We closed down the restaurant. We were chatting and chatting until they were putting the chairs on the tables and mopping the floors. And we walked out and it was just terrific. And so I was living in Toronto at the time. She was in Cleveland. It started this long distance relationship and, incredibly challenging driving back and forth, but we did it. And, we often joked it would make a great Hallmark movie. And my wife, Debbie, said, geez, the problem is it doesn't have a big obstacle. Those Hallmark movies, there's a big obstacle in the divorce. Then COVID came and they shut the border between Canada and the US. And I literally, in the midnight, the night they shut the border, I literally snuck through at 10 minutes to midnight. And I only had a few US days left because you only can do 181 days a year in the US. And I called my lawyer and I said, you need to figure this out because I'm here now. I can't cross back and I've got 11 US days left. Do something. And he did. And then we got married on Valentine's Day, which is just, it doesn't get more romantic. And the crazy thing is we actually share the same birthday. So it's this unusual, crazy love story. And when I first met her, when I was 21 years old, and she said her name was Debbie. And I said, what's your middle name? And she said, Ruth. So that's my sister's name. And she said, you got to be kidding. And it wasn't. And then, of course, when I asked about her birthday and it was the same, she said, let me see your driver's license. So anyway, this crazy, crazy love story. So we've been remarried for 3 years and hope for all that same happiness with, all of your members who've been divorced and with so many of their clients. It's a tough thing to get through, but there can be a bright light on the other side. And I wish that for everybody.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing the tips. And for those of you who didn't hear the webinar, it's available on our website at institutedfa.com. There's a lot of great information there. And we also have contact information for Gordon for those of you who are interested in learning more about the Cash Flow Cookbook. Thanks so much for your time today, Gordon.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate it.